Creativity is a way of life. I don't think I could live without creating.
It's about believing in an idea so much that you turn it into some form of art.
And it doesn't matter if what you're bringing to the world is a painting or a song or a poem or a novel or just a great conversation.
Everything we've ever heard, books we have read, places we visited, people we have loved, all of that information that blends together in order for us to create something new.
You just need to stop and look at the world and realize how utterly amazing it is and how absolutely fabulous the other beings we share the world with are. And for me, creativity is the expression of that sense of wonder.
I never really looked at creativity as a necessity until only recently.
I have a need. It's not a choice. It's a need to create, and I create with everything that I do.
Creativity is the doing of going to what could be and bringing it into the realm of what is.
Creativity is not a skill set. It's just allowing yourself to be in a state of mind where you can have fun with what you're doing.
A way of you express yourself and you create things that you're proud of and you fill with love.
And to create something that hopefully will have a lasting impression, not only for me, but for other people. It's a legacy. And creativity is that fuel that gives me the jam to go in any direction I want.
I would say that creativity is expanding your vision of something.
There's a form of creativity that means a feeling of freedom to me.
I think coming to terms with creativity is part of the human condition.
Creativity in many ways for me is almost like the material manifestation of what life is. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. Hopefully I'm trying to be a little better today than I was yesterday.
Each person alive in the world today is unique and is therefore perfect. And what they feel moved to bring to the world, the gifts that they want to share with the world, that self-realization, the fulfillment of their potential, is it. Right? That's creativity. Well, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us today. All of the credit for that video goes to Aidan Rode, who did the entire work of producing it. Isn't that beautiful? And of course,
nice work, Aidan.
ideas came from all of the speakers that have joined our podcast. Aidan's been running our podcast for quite some time now as well. And anybody who's interested to join us on the podcast, please reach out. I hope that everybody's having a ridiculously amazing time. You know, at the end of a day of learning is much more work than teaching, actually, and really exhausting. You use a lot of energy in the brain. And then at night, your brain goes through this process of moving the memories from short-term memory to medium-term memory, long-term memory. It's a huge amount of work. And so if all of you are feeling a little bit, as we say, punch drunk, like all this information and understanding and ideas, then I know that we're doing exactly what we set out to achieve. I'm grateful to everybody who's taking time out of their day to join us for the conference. It's not easy. And I think everybody today, especially with the lockdowns and the remote times that we've had together, everybody has been experiencing a little bit of pixel fatigue, right? Everyone's feeling a little bit like, okay, I'm done with looking at screens, but it has proven to be an exceptional medium for us and allowed us to provide access to many more speakers than we would have done for our in-person event, which I will be, thank you, Billy, yes, your hope cup is overflowing. That's what I'm talking about. So we're going to find, I'm going to talk a little bit about the conference in Iceland at the end of this keynote, which is coming up next year for sure. And but before we get to that, I hope everyone's had a wonderful morning of sessions. I hope everyone is looking forward to the sessions this afternoon. And what I have for you now, today, is a fantastic keynote with Bob Jacobs, and before I get into speaking with Bob Jacobs, this is the only interview conversation meeting. I was saying to Bob before we started, it's the only one I'm nervous about because I'm just so wowed by Bob and the work he does, and I'll introduce Bob properly in a moment. Before I do, I must take a moment to thank Dell, NVIDIA, Intel. This absolutely would not be a conference at all. Like, this just wouldn't exist if it wasn't from the support of these companies who've been super hands-off, super supportive, and just wanted to enable this forum for creativity. I also want to mention, which I haven't been mentioning very much, the creative community. If you go to creativecommunity.is, you'll find a completely free online community for people to share ideas. We've set it up so that everyone attending the conference, in fact, anyone is welcome. It's free to join. We have about 700 members right now, and I'd encourage you to join us to continue the conversation. Okay, now, with that said, I'm super excited to introduce Bob Jacobs. Now, Bob, I hope I've got your job title right here, because it seems like every time we speak, you're even more important than you were before. But Bob is Director of History and Information Services for the Office of Communications at NASA. Yes, actual NASA. And in salute, as a salute to you and to NASA, I'm wearing one of my proudest possessions that I don't know if it's too visible here, my pudding badge. And I have my NASA mug for my coffee.
Both with what we call the meatball logo.
Yeah,
so
yeah, and I want to ask you about that. But first of all, did I get your job title correct? Is that right?
Yes. When we agreed to do this, I was the Deputy Associate Administrator for Communications, but we underwent this huge transformation, and they asked me to take on a couple of other projects that we may speak about briefly, but then take on creating this division to transform the Office of History, as well as managing a couple of other offices that involve PO, public inquiries, and a couple of other odds and ends. But yes, you got it right.
I love the way, Bob, I love the way you described these things as odds and ends, and they're each, and I know from speaking with you that the projects that you work on, they're at such a scale that it's difficult. And I remember, I can't remember the number now, but I remember we had a chat years ago, and you said below a certain cost, it's difficult for you to arrange a meeting at NASA. I can't remember the number now. It was tens of thousands of dollars. Like, you just can't arrange a meeting about it because there's so much to organize. There's so much to plan and manage that you've got to focus on the most impactful, bigger projects. And yet, from the stories that you've told me, you find the time to reach out to the smaller organizations, to get the engagement, to get the message out there. And before we get into what you're doing for NASA now, which every time we speak about it, I find it just blows my mind. But before we get into that, what was before you got to this role now, what was your background? What were you doing that led up to the role you have now?
There was some broadcasting, some radio. I had an entire career in television news, reporter, anchor, news director, but I'd always had an interest in technology, wanted to be the first to embrace whatever the technology was that was going to help me reach people. Wanted to be the first one with satellite trucks, wanted to be the first one with live helicopters, wanted to be the first one to be online with websites, with social media. And when I felt like local news wasn't going to be my thing, I ended up landing at Associated Press in Washington, where we were developing software to help manage the news. AP was creating content, but it didn't have tools to manage that content, which seemed a little odd. So I went to London to help AP create this software management tool called ENPS. Not necessarily important here, but it was about managing and creating new information management tools. You know, everyone says that information is you know, the most important thing, and I thought, no, it's not. There's too much information. It's the ability to manage that information is going to make you king of the world. And did that and was very happy doing that. But there was this position at NASA that opened that I couldn't resist because NASA.
Come on, it's NASA.
And so I applied for it, and for whatever reason I got it, and I've been there ever since. Now 22 years. And it started in the newsroom with editorial, and doing so, I kept putting my fingers in the technology end of it, and took NASA television from a single analog transponder to multiple digital channels, and then into HD, and now when Artemis 1 comes around, it'll be the first 4K launch ever for the agency. So it's things like that that I like doing. I like finding emerging technology that help us tell our story, and anything and everything like that, including documentaries, film work that I think we're going to spend some time talking about. And now trying to do the same thing with NASA's History Office. So it's toys and things like that. That's how I ended up there.
I think I'm beginning to see a theme here, that because just before we started, we were talking briefly about, you know, leadership and management and people having a skill and an ability. And it sounds to me like you've always had an eye and an ear for the essence of the thing, right? That this is a real leadership talent, not to focus on solutions, but to focus on needs. And you mentioned about ESPN. I mean, you know, the electronic news distribution system that Associated Press introduced was massively impactful, absolutely, you know, carved the way for basically every news service, because it was necessary, it was needed. And there's this, you know, you're talking about migrating to a 4K distribution of this content, massively important. And that resolution, you know, doesn't go away. That stays of value and becomes an archival item. So it's hugely important. When you said that you saw an ad. I mean, what a brilliant thing, you know. Like I had a similar experience, Bob, when I was a young teenager. I saw an ad for a job in a call center. It's not quite the same thing as seeing an ad for a job, and it turned out to be a really great gig, you know. And it led to a lot of my. In fact, that was a stepping stone for me that led to me consulting as a futurist. So, but it was it was an early stepping stone. But there must have been a moment, like you started working at NASA, you're working on projects. What was the tipping point where you felt that you went from working for NASA or working with NASA to feeling like you're now a leader at NASA? You're now making decisions and forging the direction, the path that the organization takes.
It was actually a tragedy in the office. I was hired to do initially editorial, but I was hired to help bring the information systems into the, I call it the 21st century now since we're in it, but at the time it was the 20th. One of my colleagues, a person who was responsible for hiring me, Brian Welch, tragically passed away. And I ended up with his job a lot sooner than I expected, and I think I was prepared, because I didn't have the institutional knowledge. And when I first went to work for him, that's what he told me was, you know, I'll kick down the doors. You just tell me what it is that we need to do to help make NASA's information better. Because when I got there, NASA's website the information website was one page, and it sat in the CIO's office on a server, and we got one picture and one paragraph.
Unbelievable.
And you can't imagine that today in looking at nasa.gov. Which, by the way, Tom Cruise is responsible for us getting nasa.gov.
How is that? What happened?
Yep. We were working with him on Space Station 3D. He voiced it, and he was over at headquarters, and he told our administrator, he said, "Do you know your website sucks?" And he said, "No, I didn't." And he sat down at the assistant's desk and showed them. Now, at that time, we didn't have it. It was, we had our one page and our one picture. And it was run by the CIO. And he showed him, and he was like, "What is this?" And the administrator was shocked. I mean, again, the NASA administrator has way more other things to worry about, like, making rockets fly, and, making the budget work. But it was Tom Cruise.
I was going to say, it's difficult to turn Tom Cruise down.
So he ended up, kid you not, we flew to Houston to listen to a web presentation by Tom Cruise. And it really was by Tom Cruise. And I'm sitting there, what bizarro world am I living, sitting here listening to a web presentation by Tom Cruise. But afterwards, the CIO said he didn't want it. He didn't want to do what was recommended. And the AA at the time called me and said, "Do we want this?" And I was like, "Well, it doesn't sound like we have much of a choice. The answer is yes. I mean, there's information that's going out to the public. The answer is yes." And then he asked, "Can we do it in 4 months?" And I was like, "Well, no, not really, but that answer is yes too. Just whatever amount of money that it took, let's do it." And we did. Sadly, it launched on the day of the Columbia accident.
Wow.
But in a, could you imagine trying to get NASA information on a server sitting in the basement of headquarters with one paragraph and one photo?
It's just, Bob, it's just unbelievable thinking about
the Columbia accident. I mean,
no, forget it. But I'm just thinking about the sheer quantity of information that you've overseen being distributed, and it's got to be on point, right? It's NASA. It can't just be a first draft bit of copy that someone threw together and a photo from a phone. It's got to be NASA, and the sheer quantity of it is amazing. And you've seen that transformation and the impact on the world, and the hope that. To my mind, I'm just a fan of NASA, right? I'm a fan of what you do, like so many people. And one of my proudest possessions is a NASA sticker that you guys gave me that I have on the back of my laptop. And I proudly open my laptop in public spaces, hoping somebody will ask me about it. But the message that NASA gives is one of hope, right? Mm-hmm. That we can strive for that further horizon. But your day to day, I mean, in my mind, you're running all this media stuff. How would you describe your role today, the work that you're doing with the organization?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not me. We have an amazing team of people. and they're very talented. And we've been able to go through a lot of transitions with people who move on to greater things and not miss a beat. Whether it's different updates to nasa.gov, whether it's I got us jumped into social media in November 2008, at a time when even our own office was split as to whether or not doing that was a smart idea. But today we have one of the strongest and most trusted social media brands in the world. But it's just, I don't know, I keep using a phrase that a former acting administrator said. He's now a senior executive at Lockheed Martin. And he said, sometimes you just have to head down in color. And a lot of times that's what it is. It's put your head down in color. But at the same time, we have people, hopefully I'm one of them, that's looking over the horizon, trying to anticipate what's next and plan for it. And, what are the new technologies that we should be looking at and investing in, and trying to decide what are going to be the best investments to help share our story with the American people. We have compelling stories to tell, and someone asked me, am I a salesperson? And coming from the news industry, that kind of makes me cringe a little. And how I approach it is, no, my job is to clean the windows. My job is to let people have a better look inside the space program they're paying for. And that includes Congress, the people who are funding us. And hopefully they want to continue to fund us and increase that funding if they if they see fit. It's all, looking for the right bells and whistles, looking for the right audiences, and not forgetting that there is news every day that's breaking. I mean, it's science papers, it's milestones and missions. It's, we've got, just think about it. Sometimes I'm not going to say it isn't a hard story to tell, but, I've got a communication, it's not mine, but we've got across the office, James Webb, just released the first images. What an amazing story that telescope is. I was fortunate enough to be in South America for the launch. That could have gone bad so many ways, and it didn't. So the Science Mission Directorate and Dr. Zabrukin should be praised beyond belief on making James Webb work. And the images are just stunning, and the science is going to be unbelievable. We've got 2 rovers on Mars that are still creating unbelievable imagery and data. Perseverance and Opportunity are still moving on. Of course, we've got the International Space Station that's with astronauts on board 24/7. We've got students that are now in college who never knew a time when there weren't people living and working in space. Try to get your head around that. You know, for me, I'm so old, I'm a child of Apollo. So, you know, I know it doesn't look it.
You were what, 25 now, 26?
You know, yeah, exactly. I'm still getting carded. But, you know, so we have, you know, and not to mention all the satellites that we have. I think it's like 50 missions that are, no, it may be more satellite missions, but all these satellites that are up in space looking back at Earth, because global climate change is real and we have to get our arms around it in some way. And all that data is coming from something. Well, all that data is coming from us. You know, the scientists are armed with something from space. Hello, that's coming from NASA data, and some from ESA, and some from a couple of other nations. But the vast majority of that's coming from NASA.
Amazing.
So we have this incredible breadth of data that's, you know, oh, and oh my gosh, I forgot aeronautics. I mean, you know, we're making flight safer. You know, that little winglet that you see on the end of airplane wings, NASA invented that.
I always wondered what that did. What is that? What does it do?
It helps the airplane cut through air more efficiently. It saves about, you know, 8% on a long flight, you know, which may not sound like much, but do you know how many airplanes are in the air during any one day? That's a lot of fuel savings. And we're constantly working on, you know, we're trying to develop biofuels. We've got 2 X-planes in development. One that's totally electric, X-57. And then we're trying to bring back supersonic air flight. You know, with the retirement of Concorde, we don't have that. But we've got X-59 that should be ready for a test flight this year. So, you know, now I sound like I am a car salesman.
Yeah, but it's not
trying to sell you something. But the point, and we have people who are specialized in all these areas that are keeping up with it. And we have an office that's helps us manage all of it. So we're not trying to share all the stories at once. You know, everybody gets their moment in the sun. And it's just an incredible, incredible, not only responsibility, but it's a privilege to tell these stories. And that's how these people feel. I know that's how I feel. You know, we like being a part of something bigger than ourselves. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. And I know that sounds corny, but you know, when you work at an agency that at times does the impossible, you know, that's exciting. You know, and we're helping, you know, create a new commercial space industry. For some reason, people think people think we're in competition with it. No, we help create it. You know, now they're in competition with themselves at times. But no, we all work together to try to figure out the best way. You know, where does government end and the commercial industry can take over? And that's you know, that can be a challenge at times, but it's exciting stuff.
It's, you know, this was something, and I owe an apology actually to our good friend Guy Knopfsinger, who was due to be doing what I'm doing now and have this conversation with you. And Guy is the friend of mine through whom we met, and he's just an extraordinary individual, and was due to be having the fireside chat with you. And thank you for agreeing to switch. Erin McPherson we had yesterday needed to change days with us. And so I want you to imagine that I'm taller and better looking and American. And I'm standing in for Guy today. But but Guy gave me a couple of questions to ask you just to help with the interview, the discussion today. And one of the things he mentioned was about this public-private partnership. And I love that you described it there as it is a partnership, you're all just working together. But how do you, when you're looking at potential partnerships, what is it that rings bells for you and makes you think, yeah, this is an organization we should connect with?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is through, gosh, we've got so many vehicles to go through for them to do it. Some are just straight out contracts. Some are seed money that, we expect them to not necessarily do well the first time. It's interesting. The media covers it, and if there's an engine explosion, oh, it's a setback for whatever. And it's like, no, we gave them money for them to research and see if they could develop an engine to do this one thing. And if it explodes, okay, that's part of rocket development. And a former associate administrator once said, oftentimes you learn more from a failure than you do from success, because a potential, future issue may not show itself, when the rocket lifts off and everybody's cheering and you had a successful launch, but there may be something lingering that you didn't see that you can track down easier if for some reason you had some sort of abort on the ground, not necessarily a big explosion, although they're pretty. There are grants, there are just a host of ways that the agency provides, for lack of a better term, seed money into the corporate world to help them develop things that they're interested in developing and that we're interested seeing them develop, so that one day we can buy that as a service, as opposed to the government having to pay for it all. We'd really like for this to be a commercial industry that can help other commercial industries down the road, not just NASA. So there are lots of ways for that to happen.
But how does that work with the creative arts? Because one of the things I want us to make sure we speak about is this Hollywood in Space television series that you've been developing with Guy. And when you're looking at, because you mentioned about this, just so many stories, and of course it's always about the story. And so you've got to curate those stories and present them to the world in a way that they can engage with, right, connect with. But so just to, my understanding is that the TV show that you've been working on with Guy is about the depiction of space in the movies. And it's just full of amazing interviews with super high level directors and filmmakers. And it's just phenomenal. How does that work though, in terms of that kind of collaboration? Is it like, do you become like an executive producer, signing off a budget, or how does that collaboration work?
I don't mean for it to sound like a cop-out, because I'll explain it, but it depends. Sometimes we have projects that come through the door and they'll say, we're looking for NASA's collaboration. And we look at it, and if it's a script, we'll read the script and kind of look at it. If it's a science fiction thing, or and there are a lot of things that we take into account. A lot of it's subjective, by the way. I mean, it's just our experience with working with studios in the past, and who's on board with this thing. If you're telling me it's Michael Bay, that carries more weight than if it's an independent project.
Yeah.
But it needs to have its own funding in place, and it needs to have a couple of things that it's not using NASA as a way to go out and then fundraise. That's an important element. If they don't have anything and they're looking for NASA to be able to drop our reputation and name as a way to raise money for it, then we can't do that. We won't do that. But it's funny because there's this thing that we tell ourselves on a lot of the projects. I call it, is it feasible fiction? Is it out there, but not so out there that it gets stupid. But sometimes, we'll let it get that way. Michael Bay's Transformers, when Transformers 2 came out, Bert Ulrich, who's still managing movies, sticks his head in my office and I'm working on something, and he says, Michael Bay wants to have lunch with you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Wait, what? Who? And he said, Michael Bay. And I'm like, that Michael Bay, the director Michael Bay. So he doesn't even know who I am. Why? What? He said, no, he wants to have lunch with you. So sure enough, he did, and wanted to talk about the Transformer, but Dark Side of the Moon thing, which we did because it was Michael Bay. We had a history with him on Armageddon. Now, I wasn't around NASA during then, but sometimes you do it just because you can trust the director. He's going to take care of the agency and not put it in a bad light, and it's just entertaining. It's you're going to have a good popcorn movie. But sometimes, there's just crazy that comes across the desk and you have to say no.
I always feel
sometimes you say yes just so you can have more control over it and do, I call it, you can make it suck less.
That's
you're not looking to make it good, you're just trying to make it suck less. But or sometimes we'll go after things. When I read that, which studio got the rights to The Martian, Bert and I immediately started talking and sent Bert to Hollywood to meet with the studio to see if we could help with that. And of course we did, and it was an amazing blockbuster, and we developed a terrific relationship with Andy Weir, and so there are a lot of different ways that lead us through Hollywood's door, and some happen afterwards. The director and the producers of Gravity, which is a wild film, they didn't want to work with us at all. And we went all the way up to the studio head because we knew the premise. Chinese satellite blows up or rocket blows up, ISS flies through debris field, gets all torn up. Sandra Bullock and George Clooney figure out how to get to the Chinese space station, which they can do with a fire extinguisher, go that way. And afterwards, when they wanted some publicity for it, then they came to us, and to maintain a good working relationship with the studio. We agreed to it. So all the logos that you see in the movie were put on with CGI.
Wow.
They're not sewn on patches. They had a different NASA type patch
Yeah.
during shooting. There are all sorts of different things that can happen in supporting a feature film.
So I'm curious with Gravity. So I love sci-fi, and I have all the time in the world for a good sci-fi, but I lose engagement with it when it disregards physics. You know, when I feel like any movie, actually, I love superhero movies. I'll pay money to see any superhero punch super hard. I just love the scale of it. But how good was Gravity for the physics?
Oh. No, I mean it's you know, I mean, it's not. It's that definitely falls in feasible fiction where you just have to close your eyes, grab the popcorn, and enjoy the ride. I mean, it's not based in reality. You know, the Martian came close for a lot. Now the storms on the ground would not be hard enough to cause that kind of damage. You know, Hidden Figures was one that told a very important story, but Kevin Costner's role didn't exist. And in talking to Katherine Johnson at the time, when the movie was being made, she didn't walk a half mile to go use the ladies' room in the. She just used the restroom that was in the building.
You reminded me though,
even though it did say whites only. So there were, you know, they took a lot of liberties with reality, but it was telling such an important story. You know, we didn't insist on it being a documentary. It was a movie, and it was an important movie, we thought. And the overarching storyline was more important than some of the historical factual issues they got wrong.
You reminded me of a lovely anecdote I heard, and I don't know if it was Gene Roddenberry or somebody else in a press event, and somebody asked, what, you know, how does the gravity work on the Enterprise in Star Trek? And the answer was, very well, thank you. Next question.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you would never let physics get in the way of a good story. And of course, you know, speaking of Star Trek, we should absolutely mention
yes,
Nichelle Nichols passing, which is heartbreaking, and she was hugely groundbreaking in so many ways. And such, you know, sudden news just before the conference began. Did you know Nichelle? Did you engage with her? And
yeah, I was fortunate enough to work with her on a couple of projects. Now, knowing is a stretch. I mean, yes.
But she worked with NASA after Star Trek, right?
Oh yes. Now, exactly, and well before my joining NASA in the mid 70s, she joined NASA in an effort to make NASA look more like the United States in terms of its race and gender makeup. You may recall up until the early 80s, the late 70s, early 80s, the astronaut corps was made up of strictly fighter pilots. And you know, fighter test pilots at that time in the military were largely, if not exclusively, white male. So her work led directly to, I'll call it TFNG. I'll let your mind play with what that initialism stands for. But it was the first class of astronauts that was made up of African Americans, Asian Americans, women, men, PhDs, and still had fighter pilots in it. It was the most diverse astronaut class ever in the history of the agency.
Wow.
And I think you have to credit Nichelle Nichols' work in helping bring about that first diverse class of astronauts. And the agency worked really closely with her to go out and talk about the importance of diversity in the country, much less at NASA. And she was an amazing ambassador. And she came to headquarters a few times. And I was fortunate enough to work with her on a couple of projects. And selfishly on the other three that I would name: George Takei, whom I've met, Leonard Nimoy, I've met and worked with a couple of times, and William Shatner today. I'd say we're friends, have worked on innumerable video projects and things. And I'll smile like a little kid here and selfishly say it was because childhood dream. Yes, I'm going to go. I've got an opportunity to work with Captain Kirk. Oh,
Yeah.
You bet your ass we're going to work on something.
So this leads me to I was expecting this to be like a 20-minute chat, and it's just so interesting.
Oh, and I'm sorry if we're going way over.
No. It's I'm grateful, but I have two very brief questions, and then we probably better wrap it up, because you just reminded me of a really important question to ask you, for everyone attending the conference, especially for people in the world in general. But my first little question, because Guy asked me to ask this question, I described Guy Nofsinger, and one of the questions he asked me to ask you is, who is this mad genius Guy Nofsinger? So if you were to describe Guy, if you're introducing him to somebody, how would you say, oh, this is Guy Nofsinger, he's a, what would you say?
This amazing video director producer who is incredible at making Star Spangled Awesome.
That's great.
And we just gelled at NASA when he was one of the producers. And anyone that, whether you are on the video editing side, having to get direction from either someone above or next to you, or you're that person who has this vision in your head and you know how you want it to look and feel and smell, having to work with someone who's shooting and editing, the ability to do that, since we're talking Star Trek, to do that mind meld and get it through. Guy is unbelievably talented at being able to see your vision and capture it on video. And he has done it for every project on which we've worked. And I have no idea how he does it, but he does it. And when I've had to take hard right-hand turns, it's never been that, I had this much of it done. No, it really needs to go here. No, he's been, okay, we can do that. We can add this and do this transition here and it'll be just fine. I mean, he's just a very talented guy who's able to see other people's visions on top of his own in order to create an incredible product.
It's a certain type of genius, right? And back to that thing about who do you choose to work with, you can tell when you meet someone like Guy that it's just, yeah, this is going to be possible. We are going to bend the rules of physics, and it'll be okay if we have to. My last question for you, and you know, it was interesting speaking with Erin yesterday about her advice for people starting out in career. Her advice was to always look for the green shoots, because it can be a long haul. She was saying that some of the projects she works on, it's a 3.5-year process. It could be longer for you guys, I'm sure. And how do you keep going with the project is to look for the green shoots, focus on the green shoots. It will be a great oak one day, right? Today it's a green shoot. If you were to give advice to somebody starting out, they have a dream, they have a vision, they've got a voice, they've got a sense of something that they want to achieve, what advice would you give that person who, you know, has got to keep going? Or what advice, and another way to phrase the question is, if you had a time telephone, I speak a lot about time telephones at the conference, because I say you can't be your own time telephone as far as we know, unless you guys, by the way, I'm waiting for my anti-gravity belt, but we haven't yet, as far as we know, got time telephones, but you can be somebody else's time telephone. You can provide that wisdom, that experience, that insight, that understanding for someone else who's at the beginning of their career. What would that insight be that you would share with yourself when you were starting out? What would you advise somebody to do? Because for me, it would be take more naps.
Yeah. If it's with and God, I hate saying that word, it depends. But if it's with an organization, get your toe in the door to do anything. And then make yourself indispensable once you're in the door.
Great.
Because once you're getting inside is the hardest part. Once you're inside, it's easier for people to see your brilliance. And it's also easier for you to see whether or not it's really what you wanted to do. Because I've seen people on the outside saying, this has been my dream, and then they get inside and go, oh crap, this isn't what I thought it would be. Now I've got to rethink my life, you know. So get in, get early. If it provides internships, do it. I mean, I remember talking myself into the campus radio station when I was a freshman, and they bragged how they only took juniors. And I was thinking, that's way too late to decide whether or not this is what you want to do, because you're a year away from graduating. And so that end of it is one thing. But it's whatever it is, get into it as early as possible so you know where the stones are. And then the other part of it is find people who are already there, who are already doing it. Frankly, like at conferences like these, if it was face-to-face somewhere, and see if you can find a mentor or two, people who can advise you as you continue to advance, who would be willing to tell you how much you suck. And
fantastic.
and not in a way that is designed to hurt your feelings, but you need to know. You know, I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't care that, you know, you came up as the best of everything through grade school, high school, whatever it is. When you stick your foot in the real world, you're going to find out how much you suck. And you want people who will tell you that early on, so that then you can make the adjustments, so that by the time you are ready to talk yourself into a job with a production house or inside an organization or wherever, now you're armed. Now you can write. Now you can shoot. Now you can edit. Now you've got the tools to knock other people over and get the job that you want.
This is fantastic.
And really those are the most valuable pieces of advice I ever got coming up. And I was lucky to have a couple of patient mentors, and again, they taught me early on, don't be offended by what I'm about to tell you. Everybody at this point in their career sucks. Some suck less than others, but they give you honest reaction, and some of it's good. That's not to say that you're not more talented than anyone else coming through, but you're walking onto a field with people who have been doing it 10, 15 years, and they can turn it around faster and better than you can.
This is fantastic. Fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we're now over time because Bob, you're
okay.
just
so
dangerously
sorry.
fascinating. No. It's mesmerizing, the breadth of experience that you share. I have to first of all thank you. Can we have a virtual
No, pleasure's all mine.
applause? I don't know if you can see everybody there, Bob, but lots of people waving. This is the Zoom applause, right? Everyone does jazz hands. So thank you so much. And it's a real privilege to have you with us today. You mentioned about meeting in person, and I absolutely must mention, we're planning to host the Creativity Conference in person in Iceland, in Reykjavik, next year, first week of August. We're aiming for the 1st to the 3rd. So right at the beginning of the month. Please watch this space. Please watch the website for news and updates on this. And I hope very much, Bob, to be inviting you to join us in Iceland. You may be inundated with people that want you to be their mentor. But once
Looking
again,
forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so glad everyone's here for the conference. Bob, it's just wonderful to get time with you.